I didn't leave in a dramatic way. There was no argument. No shouting. No slammed doors. I just packed a bag and disappeared. People like to believe that walking away is always an act of courage. Sometimes, it's just an act of exhaustion. I was tired of explaining myself. Tired of disappointing people. Tired of feeling like I was failing at a life everyone else seemed to understand. From the outside, I had everything. A stable job. A relationship that looked healthy. People who cared. But inside, I felt like I was living someone else's story. Not the one I had chosen. The one I had accepted. Every day felt like a performance. Smiles that felt automatic. Conversations that felt rehearsed. Plans that felt disconnected from who I really was. The worst part wasn't that I was unhappy. It was that I didn't know what happiness even meant anymore. My partner used to ask me simple questions. What do you want? Where do you see yourself? Are you okay? I always answered with something safe. I'm fine. Things will work out. Don't worry. But fine is the language of people who don't know how to speak honestly anymore. Inside, I felt trapped. Not by people. By expectations. Everyone had a version of me in their head. Responsible. Reliable. Stable. But that version didn't feel real. It felt heavy. Like a role I was afraid to stop playing. At night, I lay awake listening to my own thoughts echo. Not dramatic thoughts. Quiet ones. What if this isn't my life? What if I'm wasting time? What if I don't belong here? Those questions didn't make me panic. They made me numb. Because numbness is easier than change. Until it isn't. The breaking point didn't come as a crisis. It came as silence. One evening, sitting across from the person who loved me, I realized I had nothing to say. No stories. No dreams. No excitement. Just presence without connection. And connection without honesty isn't connection. It's habit. I saw it in their eyes. Concern. Confusion. Hope. And I knew I couldn't keep pretending. But I also didn't know how to tell the truth. So I chose the easier option. I left. No explanation. No goodbye. Just absence. Disappearing felt simpler than confessing. The first days alone felt strange. Not painful. Quiet. I walked through unfamiliar streets like a ghost. No one knew me. No one expected anything from me. And for the first time in years, I felt light. But lightness without direction becomes emptiness. The nights were the hardest. No messages. No voices. No reminders of who I used to be. Just me and the consequences of my silence. I told myself I needed space. Time to think. Time to breathe. Time to understand myself. But understanding doesn't come from running. It comes from facing what you left behind. And I had left behind more than people. I had left behind responsibility. Love. Trust. Things you don't replace easily. Somewhere between the quiet mornings and the lonely evenings, a thought started to grow. What if I didn't escape my life? What if I abandoned it? There's a difference. Escape is about survival. Abandonment is about avoidance. And I wasn't sure which one I had chosen. I remembered the way my partner used to look at me when I was distant. Not angry. Hopeful. As if waiting for me to return to myself. But I never did. I chose silence instead. The city I moved to didn't care who I was. And that felt comforting. No history. No expectations. No emotional weight. But also, no meaning. I realized something painful. I didn't miss the place I left. I missed the person I was before I stopped trying. The version of me who still believed in connection. Who still believed in effort. Who still believed that honesty was better than escape. Now, I was living in a place where no one knew my story. But I was also living without one. And a life without a story doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like suspension. Like you're waiting for something to happen. But nothing ever does. The question wasn't whether I could go back. The question was whether I deserved to. Because leaving people without explanation isn't just distance. It's damage. And damage doesn't disappear when you change cities. It follows you. Quietly. Like a shadow. The city never asked me why I was there. It didn't care where I came from or what I had left behind. That should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like erasure. My days became quieter. Not peaceful. Empty. I worked in a small office where no one knew my past. They only knew the version of me that showed up on time and spoke politely. No questions. No curiosity. No connection. At first, I told myself that was exactly what I needed. A clean start. A neutral space. A life without emotional weight. But weight doesn't disappear when you walk away. It just changes form. At night, the silence became louder. Not because of noise. Because of memories. I started dreaming about the life I had abandoned. Not in dramatic scenes. In ordinary moments. Shared dinners. Familiar jokes. The quiet comfort of being known. In my dreams, no one accused me. They just looked at me like they were waiting. Waiting for an explanation I never gave. I woke up with the same thought every morning. I didn't leave because I was brave. I left because I was afraid. Afraid of disappointing them. Afraid of admitting I was lost. Afraid of saying I didn't know who I was anymore. So I disappeared. And disappearing had consequences. I tried to distract myself. Long walks. Busy schedules. Background noise. But distraction only works when you're not paying attention. And I was starting to pay attention. One evening, I found myself standing outside a cafe, watching people laugh inside. Not out of jealousy. Out of recognition. They were present. I wasn't. I was observing life, not participating in it. That realization hurt more than I expected, because participation requires vulnerability. And vulnerability was what I had run from. I started scrolling through old photos on my phone. Not to torture myself. To remember. The smiles looked real. The moments felt alive. I wasn't pretending back then. I was just confused. But confusion is part of growth. Avoidance is part of disappearance. The guilt began to surface slowly. Not as panic. As heaviness. Every time my phone vibrated, I felt a small surge of fear. Not because I expected a message from them. Because I knew I didn't deserve one. You don't walk away from love without leaving a scar. One night, I finally opened our old chat. The last message was from them. Can we talk? No anger. No blame. Just hope. And I had answered with silence. Silence is the cruelest response. It doesn't explain. It abandons. My chest tightened as I read it again. Not because I missed the relationship. Because I missed the version of myself who knew how to stay. I had told myself I needed space to find myself. But all I had found was distance. Distance from people. Distance from meaning. Distance from my own emotions. I realized something painful, I wasn't healing. I was hiding. And hiding doesn't lead to clarity. It leads to isolation. I started writing messages I never sent. Apologies. Explanations. Confessions. They stayed in my notes. Unfinished. Because courage felt heavier than silence. One evening, after a long day that felt exactly like every other day, I sat on the edge of my bed and asked myself a question I couldn't avoid anymore: what did I actually gain by leaving? No responsibilities. No emotional pressure. No expectations. But also, no connection. No intimacy. No sense of belonging. Freedom without meaning is just loneliness with better lighting. I wasn't rebuilding my life. I was existing beside it. The moral dilemma wasn't about going back. It was about accountability. Could I live with the knowledge that I had hurt someone without even explaining why? Could I accept that my silence had become part of their story, or did I owe them something more than disappearance, because disappearing doesn't erase responsibility? It postpones it. The guilt started showing up in unexpected ways. I became impatient with strangers. Detached in conversations. Restless in quiet moments. My body was there. My mind was somewhere else. Always revisiting the moment I chose to leave instead of speak. I wasn't running anymore. But I wasn't facing anything either. I was stuck between two versions of myself, the one who escaped. And the one who never explained. Both felt incomplete. I didn't know if reaching out would fix anything. But I knew staying silent was breaking something inside me. Not loudly. Quietly. And quiet damage is the hardest to notice. But also the hardest to heal. I stared at my phone one night, my finger hovering over the screen. One message. One sentence. One honest attempt. Not to return. Not to fix the past. Just to acknowledge it. But honesty requires courage. And courage felt like the one thing I had left behind. I stared at the screen for a long time. One sentence. That was all it would take. Not a return. Not forgiveness. Not a second chance. Just honesty. My hands were shaking, not because I was afraid of their reaction, but because I was afraid of my own. Because once I spoke, I could no longer pretend that silence had been enough. The message was simple. I'm sorry I left without explaining. I was lost, and I chose to disappear instead of being honest. I didn't press send immediately. I read it again and again, as if the words might change their meaning. They didn't. They just felt heavy. Because honesty always does when it comes late. When I finally pressed send, nothing dramatic happened. No instant reply. No emotional explosion. Just quiet. But the quiet felt different this time. It wasn't empty. It was open. For the first time since I had left, I wasn't running from my past. I was acknowledging it. Hours passed. Then my phone vibrated. One message. I wondered every day why you disappeared. Thank you for telling me. No anger. No accusation. Just truth. And truth, I realized, doesn't need drama to be powerful. It just needs presence. We didn't talk for long. We didn't revisit every detail. Some stories don't need to be rewritten. They just need to be understood. When the conversation ended, I felt something unfamiliar. Not relief. Responsibility. The kind that doesn't crush you. The kind that grounds you. I hadn't fixed the past. But I had stopped avoiding it. And that changed how the present felt. The city still looked the same. The streets still echoed with unfamiliar footsteps. But I no longer felt like a ghost walking through my own life. I felt real. Not healed. Not complete. But present. I started noticing small things again. The way the air felt in the evening. The sound of conversations in cafes. The quiet comfort of simply being aware. Awareness became my new form of belonging. Not to a place. To myself. I stopped thinking of my disappearance as an escape. It wasn't. It was avoidance. And avoidance had cost me more than I ever admitted. But it had also taught me something important: you can leave a place. You can leave people. But you can't leave responsibility. Responsibility follows you. Not loudly. Silently. Until you turn around and face it. I didn't go back to my old life. Some doors close without reopening. But I carried the lesson with me: honesty is heavier than silence, but silence is heavier in the long run. My new life wasn't exciting. It wasn't perfect. It was honest. And honesty felt like progress. I learned how to stay in conversations, even when they were uncomfortable. How to answer questions without hiding. How to admit when I didn't know who I was becoming. Because not knowing is better than pretending. The biggest change wasn't external. It was internal. I stopped disappearing. Not from places. From myself. I let myself feel regret without drowning in it. I let myself remember without punishing myself. I let myself move forward without pretending the past didn't exist. And that balance felt like peace. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind. The kind that comes when you finally stop running from your own story. I didn't walk away from everything that loved me. I walked away from my own voice. Now, I'm listening to it again. Not to rewrite the past. To live the present. And the present, for the first time in a long while, feels like mine.